Hey everybody, I know it's been like 1,000 years since I filmed anything on here on YouTube. I really want to get back more into long form videos because I feel like that's like more where I can express myself with nuance, and I'm also like kind of creatively burned out on TikTok right now, but maybe I'll get back in the groove of things in like a month or so. But yeah, life update. I'm finishing off my senior year at Columbia. I am feeling pretty good about it. I've had a fantastic senior year. Um, Ups and downs for sure. But I wanted to kind of just talk about the things that I wish I had known before transferring. When I was first starting the transfer process almost 2 years ago during this time, 2 years ago, I just submitted my application for Barnard on February 17th, 2021. And since then, I've grown so much. And now that it's 2 years later, I can finally sit down and reflect on the things that I wish I'd known prior to transferring, a video that I would love to see back when I was in the thick of it, you know. So I've separated this video into 3 parts. The part 1 is loneliness is part of the process, part 2, culture shock, and part 3, acceptance and celebration. So I guess I'll just get started with part 1. And I'd call this loneliness as part of the process because when I went to school, which is pretty different from most of my other transfer peers, I went to a school 20 minutes from where I went to high school, which honestly is not that uncommon with all my friends from high school. And in high school, I had really expanded my social circle because a lot of my friends at the time went to a nearby public school. I was very politically active. I had a pretty good network of both professionals in the area as well as friends. I had a pretty good idea since deciding to stay at University of Louisville what I was going to do post-grad. I had a pretty direct path towards my goals at the time. I wasn't on social media at all. I didn't really understand that part. I didn't download TikTok until my sophomore, junior year of college. So I had my worldview and my social circle was pretty small. And in that, I found a lot of enjoyment in that. So nonetheless, when I first moved into college, half of my friends were commuting students who commuted from home. I chose to live on campus. I'm very grateful for that even now still. But even then, a lot of my friends on my floor or the floor above me were all people that I knew previously. I had little to no people that I had met new in college, right? Even the people who didn't go to my school, even the people from like nearby cities and towns in Kentucky, I had known of or I had known briefly. So needless to say, when I first moved to New York City alone at age 21, I was so lonely. In the first 6 weeks, I think I was very, very sad. Even though I needed that time to sort of reflect on all the things that led me to transferring and now accepting that I was there, which I'll talk about a little bit later, starting over was like really, really hard. A lot of my other friends who transferred already had some sort of network here in New York City or knew somebody or had a family member or went to schools that were close enough away where they could still maintain friendships there. And that was just not the case for me. That was just not the case. When people ask me like, how many people did you know in New York before coming here? I said 0. And that was truth. Like I did not know a single soul here. Still, it was just like, I didn't know anybody. I would spend like most of my weekends going to Boston where my sister goes to college and my family members had just moved to. So again, I wish I'd spent a little bit more time here in the beginning stages, even though I needed that time now to like incorporate myself into the wider social circles of Columbia. But I also needed that time to just like be with myself. So once a week I would walk all the way to Times Square on like Thursday nights, or so introduction to New York City as well, because I had never lived in New York besides even going in Columbia. Like I find it like kind of interesting that a lot of people I know who transferred are from NYU, but that's a different story. So I was just adjusting to both New York City and Columbia, which are two big adjustments for me. So it was just like, I was just like floating through the first semester of my junior year like this. And I was just trying to get in and out of friend groups. I was like, solidified myself. Nobody kind of knew what they were going to be doing in a year. So it was like very much floating. Like much like your freshman year, first semester, I would imagine. But then again, in junior year. So that was great. But then second semester, junior year, things definitely like picked up a little bit. I got a little bit more solidified. I think midway during my junior year, I finally solidified a few friends that I could trust, that I would grow with. But yeah, so that's kind of like part one, loneliness is part of the process. And I would say to anybody, like, just expect the first 6 weeks to be rough. Expect your first 6 weeks to be alone. Expect your first 6 weeks that you might not be with the people you're friends with now, like much like your freshman semester, right? And to accept that and embrace it, because being able to be okay being alone with yourself will set you up for the future. Because again, I'm graduating, I don't know where I'm going to be or my friend group is going to look like a year from now. So it's a really good lesson to have, that being able to be resilient and being able to adapt and being able to be alone. Very, very important things, life skills, not just for college. So that leads me to part two, culture shock. So New York City is very, very, very different than Louisville, Kentucky. And despite the fact that I came from a metropolitan or like a city environment, quote unquote, I came from a suburban environment in Kentucky, because when I was in Kentucky, I was going to be like the city girl from Louisville, but little did I know coming to New York City is such a big, big culture shock. Even though I was blessed and privileged enough to come here once a year growing up, it's still a culture shock to be living here. And I even spent a summer here in high school, but even then, big, big culture shock. I would say I'd separate the culture shock into the drinking culture and the dating culture. Very, very different here, or what I'm used to. Drinking culture in particular, like, I didn't know what pregame meant until like I had to like Google it, because I thought it was like a game. I don't know. I didn't know this. There's so much to do, an oversaturation of bars and nightclubs and everything like that. And while that's been a great catalyst to get to know people, and even I subscribe to it, it's such a culture shock coming from Louisville, where I never went to a bar. I never did that before I moved. So it's just very interesting. And that's also part like growing up too, from the ages of 19 to 21, your formative years, like you do all that type of thing. But I learned it a little bit late, I guess, because I did not know that was like the primary form of like social activities. Like, I guess in Louisville, at least in my social circle, like my experience, like when you get to know someone, you go out for coffee, you go hiking, you go for a walk in Cherokee Park. Like, these are the type of things you do. So it's very interesting. And I think that also it comes down to like not having a car and being a more walkable city with public transport has played a big part in that as well. So yeah, I think that was like a big, big shock factor for me coming to New York City. Interning here was also really, really tough. Like, I worked in a PR firm last year, and just like being in New York City in the summer, working culture, very, very, very different. When I was in Louisville, I worked like mostly political jobs and local government. I would just drive to work and through the old farms, like through the suburbs, very comfortable life. Whereas here, it's like subways, sweating in the subways, 9 to 6, grind. On Microsoft Teams, you're like, what do you call it? Like, your active thing is like very important. A very computer focused job. And that was just like not something so I guess that's also a transition from politics to public relations. But just being very controlled of time, like they understand that value of time so much here, and productivity is so much higher and valued so much higher here, which I found interesting. Different types of productivity, but still, just living in New York, it's a minefield for that type of thing. I would say I'd also put under this culture shock is missing home. During my first year, I really missed Kentucky, because I knew my last day in Kentucky was probably one of the saddest days of my life, because I knew I could never come back and that things would never feel the same after my worldview has changed so much in New York City. And I think that's true. I knew when I left, it would never be the same. I would never look at the world the same. I knew my experiences in New York would change me in many, many different ways. And I think that's true. Home doesn't really exist anymore, which is like, it's a different feeling. My home is different. I would say it feels different. My friends look different. My work looks different. Everything like that, you know? But I think that's also a grieving process of letting go of your old life and who you were and kind of starting over with a fresh identity. My identity also shifted with my social media identity, different things. I chose to prioritize different things because I went through a lot of burnout before I came here. So yeah, so just knowing and being in culture shock is perfectly part of the process, and it's going to happen. You know, they don't really tell you these things like orientation, but that's how it works. Third and final point, which is acceptance and celebration, because I admire every single transfer student, whether you transfer from NYU or like Kentucky like me. It is such a hard process. There is so much bureaucracy. When I look back, I don't even know how I did it, because all those forms I had to complete, all those essays I had to write, all those teacher recommendations I had to get the current school to transfer to this school, not knowing I would get in or not. It was very stressful, and I really admire and be proud of yourself for doing that, because it is, when I look back now, I really don't know how I did it. Like writing essays in the middle of the night, like it was rough, and everyone has a different reason for transferring, I think. I've met some people who were just wanted to go to a better school in New York City, and I've met some people who had no choice but to transfer because of whatever circumstances they had. And I think I'm in the middle of those two things. For professionally, culturally, socially, New York City would have been a perfect fit, you know? So accepting that and embracing it, and then just being proud of yourself that you did something and you advocated for yourself in whichever way to be in a better spot than you were. And that margin of being where you were and now doesn't have to be huge. Misunderstand is that your life does not have to be miserable for you to transfer. It doesn't have to be so sad or so desperate for you to transfer. Some days I'm like, did I really have to transfer, you know? I had such a great life. I had a great social community in Louisville. I had a great direct path after graduation. I was known to a lot of people. I felt very comfortable in that space. I genuinely, and I still do believe, I loved the state government work I was doing. I felt very fulfilled in my 20-year-old self. That 2 years later, I'd be a TikToker, Pilates going, New York City going, like I would laugh. I'd be so appalled. I'd say I'm 50, 60% happier than I was in Louisville if I'd stayed. And hindsight is always 20/20 in these things. When I first moved, I would be like, I'm 100% so glad I transferred. And now it's more like, as I grow with it and I grow and I reflect, 2% margin, or 100% happier. It doesn't have to be like a 180. It can just be a slight change of happiness and growth. And that can be enough, you know? That can be a reason enough to transfer. And especially since I waited to my end of sophomore year, you know, I was really debating this for so long to transfer. When I transferred, I thought like everybody would be sophomores and not, but actually the majority ended up being juniors, which is interesting to me. So just accepting that for sure. And I think this is different from my previous video on transferring, but I would say being okay with regret is also super, super important. Back in my last video, I said I would never regret a single thing I did. And now looking back, I would say I do have regrets, but you have to be okay with the choices you had at the time and the feelings you had at the time and what you're involved with at the time shifts, right? So if I was like almost 23-year-old me sitting here is like, oh, I wish I'd done this, this, and this and gone to a different school freshman year. Yes, I can say all that, but I didn't know what I knew now, right? And I was talking to a coach about this, about grieving this and being okay with grieving this and then letting it go. So my journey looks way, way different than most other people's at Columbia, but I'm proud of myself for the things that I've done, and I have a lot more resilience now, and I can still grieve that part of me that wishes I had done something differently, right? All these things can be true, and two things can be true at once, right? I can miss my old life in Kentucky every day, but I can also really celebrate the one I have now. And sort of reconciling these two truths will really, really help you when you transfer, in my opinion. It's not a one or the other type of situation most times. That's why I kind of call it like a marginal happiness that you're trying to achieve here, right? Whether that be socially, professionally, whatever it may be. But now, like my last point and this like part 3, and embracing, because now second semester senior year, I am really glad to be part of the Columbia community. I think even though I haven't like 100% integrated yet, and like I don't know that many people, right? I still have even now expanded my social circles. Even last week, I was able to like become closer with a lot of people that I hadn't expected. Everyone is kind of more connected here. Everyone kind of knows each other here, which is interesting, just like Kentucky. But going to a lot more social events than I probably would have been, going to the library even more than I probably would have, really savoring in my college process because it took me so long to get here. I had to build myself up from zero, and now I'm just really, really enjoying what I had done before to put me in this position. I didn't do any student government stuff here. I didn't do anything dramatic. I wasn't part of every club. In fact, I'm part of like no clubs right now. But I'm still so happy to be here, right? I think I just feel very comfortable here. And even though my time is ending here, I think a lot of the friendships I made here will still last because a lot of people are staying here in New York or like whatever, you know? So I've been able to embrace everything I've had and celebrating what is to come. I'm really excited for what's to come as well. So thank you guys for watching this very ranty video, but I hope it helps. And if you have any questions about transferring, especially if you come from like middle America or anything like that, please let me know in the comments because I wish I had these things when I was in the thick of it. But I can tell you all, it is worth it. If you're like on the fence like I was, just do it if you have the privileges to. Anyways, guys, stay tuned for more videos. Thank you for watching.